Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angel Veza. I'm the Business Engagement Manager at ReFed. Through my role, I've had the pleasure of getting to know and collaborating with all of these wonderful sustainability leaders here today with me on this panel. Today the panel is Food Waste Reduction in Action, so we're really going to be diving into the different solutions that each of these companies and organizations have chosen to focus on and implement. We're going to be talking a lot about the why behind the reasoning they've chosen these solutions, the challenges that they've had to overcome, and the successes to date, both in terms of the environmental impact, but also in terms of the social impact, and how they've seen these solutions really be an effective business strategy. So without further ado, I will quickly introduce each of our speakers today. So starting right here is Becky Green. She's the Senior Manager of Sustainability at Compass Group. She's been with the company for about 4 years now. She's, from my personal experience, very passionate about food waste. She actually launched their waste tracking tool, which has helped their accounts reduce food waste by 11%, really getting them close to the goal of reducing food waste by 25% by 2020. She also launched their Stop Food Waste Day, which has expanded to 34 countries this year. So congratulations on that. Also with us is Denise Osterhues from Kroger. She is the Senior Director of Corporate Affairs and leads Kroger's sustainability, philanthropy, and community engagement efforts as part of the Corporate Affairs leadership team. In this role, she helps lead Kroger's Zero Hunger, Zero Waste social impact plan. Also with us is Monica McBride from the World Wildlife Fund. She's the Senior Program Officer on their food waste team. She joined the team just last January in 2017, but has managed a lot of great projects already, including demonstration projects focused on food waste reduction in the hospitality sector, quantification of on-farm loss of specialty crops in the United States, and working with leading retailers to understand their current scope of food loss and waste to implement zero-waste merchandising strategies. Ashley McCormack from McDonald's is also with us. She's the manager of U.S. Public Affairs. She focuses on the company's sustainability and climate action work, engaging with stakeholders and partners to advance the company's sustainability goals. And last but not least is Thomas McQuillan. He is the food service sales, Director of Food Service and Sales and Sustainability at Baldor. And so, Thomas, you joined the team in 2015 to help them identify a cost-effective way to repurpose their large amount of food byproduct created by the company's Fresh Cuts facility, which has now resulted in Sparks, which he will talk about more today. But I'll pause there and let these wonderful people introduce themselves a bit more and talk about their initiatives. And I'll let Becky kick us off.
Hi, I'm Becky Green, and as Angel said, we made a commitment last year to reduce our wasted food by 25% by 2020. And so for the first year, we kind of decided to focus on awareness and education and how we can reduce at the source. And so, we've been doing food recovery, but for the first year, we kind of focused on those source reduction initiatives instead. So we worked with ReFed on some solution pilots, so they would go into our accounts to see where we can make changes to make a big difference in what we were wasting front and back of house. We are working with Eatable on doing waste audits in K-12 accounts, higher education, corporate offices accounts, to do the same thing and show, and we've been able to show some real change by just small changes that they could make. And then, as Angel also mentioned, last year we launched our waste tracking tool, Waste Not, and so that tracks our overproduction, production, and out-of-date inventory by station in our units, and right now it's in about 25% of our units and pushing out to all of them soon. And then lastly is Stop Food Waste Day. We worked with Save the Food, the NRDC, and the Ad Council to get that education. It was a really great success and has been in 34 countries this year. and was really a way for our clients and guests and our associates to come around stopping food waste and giving them tips that they can take home, as well as making them aware while they're in our cafes.
Denise? Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Denise Osterhues with Kroger. And for those of you who don't know Kroger, we're a big grocery retailer. We have about 500,000 people who work in 2,800 retail stores in 35 states and the District of Columbia. So we are Kroger, pretty much east of the Mississippi, and then other banner names in the west. So it might be Fred Meyer, Ralph's, Fry's, Smith's, and some others. So it depends on where you live and whether you know us. We're not in New York, Philadelphia,
Yeah.
Connecticut. So you may know us and what we do. I don't have to explain to you why we're working on hunger relief and food waste, because that's kind of what we're all here talking about. But I do want to just mention a little bit about Zero Hunger, Zero Waste, which is our commitment to end hunger in our communities and eliminate food waste across our company, eliminate waste and food waste across our company by 2025. So this was really our plan that we introduced last September in 2017 to kind of articulate what we really wanted to stand for as a company and what we felt was really authentic to our purpose, which is to feed the human spirit. But as a grocery retailer, we're acknowledging that we have done a lot in hunger relief in over the decades in all of our banners, but we know we have more to do, and there's a lot of food that is wasted, and there are a lot of people who are still hungry. So we feel like zero for us is really the only acceptable answer. So that's really the goal that makes the most sense for us. So that's what we're going to work for. So a couple things that we're doing about that. One is we're actually working with ReFed and on our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Innovation Fund. So right now we're in the process of working on the strategy and governance, and then we'll do a call for proposals later in the year. And that will fund innovative ideas and solutions, mainly to help us find ways to reduce food waste that we could scale across the company. So that's something we're really excited about. We haven't done before, so that'll be new this year. Our goal is to donate 1 billion meals by 2020 on the Zero Hunger side and 3 billion meals by 2025. And that's an acceleration of where we've been. Especially by 2025. We donated and rescued food and donated meals at about 325 million meals in 2017. But not just more food, more balanced meals. So really focusing also on healthy food and recognizing that meals and nutrition are really important to our company and to the families who need the food. The other thing we've agreed to do and decided we want to take a leadership role is in advocacy. And so advocating for public policy and solutions that will help us in Zero Hunger, Zero Waste is something we've committed to do. So working with our partners and where it makes the most sense, we'll kind of help take a leadership position on that. And then in terms of zero waste, we will work toward our goal that we already committed to in 2016, which was to be a zero waste company by 2020. But on top of that, we committed to be a zero food waste company by 2025. And that is a little bit of a bigger goal for us and something that we've been digging into. And so to help us do that, we've been working with Monica's team at World Wildlife Fund. And so Monica and Pete Pearson and their team have really been helping us map our food waste footprint. Because part of that commitment for us was to create, we had to set a baseline for food waste now so that we know what to reduce from going forward. And we also committed to be transparent in food waste reporting going forward. So we are just wrapping up the final stages of that food waste kind of analysis and project. So thanks to World Wildlife Fund and that team for helping us with that. Our other lead partner on Zero Hunger, Zero Waste is Feeding America. So Liz is kind of sitting down there. She'll wait. Liz and Karen Hanner and the Feeding America team has been awesome. We've worked with them for so many years on food rescue. And so we really appreciate their help. So between World Wildlife Fund and Feeding America and ReFed, they're really our premier, top partners in Zero Hunger, Zero Waste.
And really then to recap everything, our goal is really to transform our communities and improve health for millions. So again, these are huge goals, we get it, they're ambitious, they're bold, but we really felt like to drive our business forward and to kind of really clarify our promise and our commitments, we needed to kind of take a step forward. And it's really proved to be a rallying cry for our business, for our leaders and our associates who are now kind of excited, they're really clear about where we're going and engaged in helping find the solutions to do it.
Thanks.
Great, good afternoon. So I'm Monica McBride with the World Wildlife Fund. I'm kind of the odd woman out on the panel. So I'll start just by giving you a little bit of background about why World Wildlife Fund, which you all probably know as a leading conservation organization, is interested in food waste and food more broadly. So our mission at World Wildlife Fund is to conserve and protect the biodiversity from the most pressing threats and to build a future in which humans can live in harmony with nature. Well, as a lot of you know, and as we heard this morning, agricultural production is one of the most pressing threats to biodiversity. In fact, it's responsible for about 70% of biodiversity lost across the planet. And it has obviously other ancillary impacts as well. It's responsible for 70% of fresh water use, about a third of our GHG emissions, and then about 50% of the soil that we lose every year. So when you take all those statistics into consideration, you consider that we waste about 1 out of every 3 calories that's produced. That is unsustainable if we want to achieve our mission at WWF, which is to preserve biodiversity and to prevent further habitat conversion. So that's why we're in the business of food waste and why we're helping a lot of the leading companies and industries that Angel mentioned to address this issue. And so today I'm on the panel to speak specifically about our work with the hospitality sector, which we kicked off about 2 years ago now with a partnership with Hilton actually, which then led to a larger industry-wide initiative to get everyone to focus on prevention, donation, and diversion. So we worked with a working group of stakeholders from a lot of the leading brands in the U.S., including Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, IHG, which owns like Holiday Inn and Intercontinental, and first embarked on this with a research study to really understand what were some of the issues that the hospitality sector was facing and how could we go about addressing these in a series of demonstration projects. And so on my slide I have a lot of the partners that were involved, and this was all with generous support from the Rockefeller Foundation and in partnership with the American Hotel and Lodging Association, which is the big industry trade group for the hospitality sector. And so that was an amazing partnership that actually really helped us get into the door with a lot of these companies and a lot of the specific properties that we worked with. And so after the research was completed and we had an understanding of what was driving food waste in the sector, we came up with 3 different intervention options that we wanted to pilot with properties across the U.S. So we managed to recruit 10 different properties across the U.S. We had them in Washington, D.C., California, one in the Midwest, we had one in Milwaukee actually. And so we tested 3 different interventions. One was looking at how can we redesign the buffet, which is obviously a leading source of waste in a lot of these companies, to make it more efficient. What are some of the points of intervention that you can easily work with that don't jeopardize the customer experience, still provide the same level of abundance, but are not overly abundant and lead to a lot of waste? The second is menu design and menu planning. What were some of the ways where they could cross-utilize various ingredients across menus, across different banquets that they were serving on the same day or in the same week to optimize all of the ingredients that they were using? And then finally, training and just awareness building and culture shifting within the property was a big opportunity that was pointed out in the research. So we actually worked with a company called Lobster Inc. that does a lot of online training modules for the hospitality sector to develop a 5-video training series specifically focused on food waste. And so it's about a total of 30 minutes, which is not a lot of time, but in the hospitality industry is a lot of time. And we asked the properties to implement one or multiple of these 3 interventions. And so we worked with them for about 4 months, all remotely. We had to work with the champions on site to actually implement this with their employees. And at the end of the pilots, we were measuring the entire way, but at the end we looked at kind of pre and post intervention to understand, was there a shift in the amount of waste that they were generating. And at most of the properties there was, the more detailed the intervention was, or the more complicated it was, the more waste reduction they saw. So if you just were doing separation and measurement and you didn't have time to do any of the other interventions, you still saw some reductions, probably around 10%, 10 to 15% was our range. If you incorporated that with training, that bumped you up to the kind of 20 to 25% range. And then if you went even further and you did audits of your buffets and you really focused on redesigning those, you could see between 30 and 40% reduction. So I'll stop there, but there are a lot of other components of this that I'll get into during the Q&A. And then the last plug I'll put in is for the website that we developed as a result of all of these learnings and efforts, which is hotelkitchen.org. And that's kind of a synthesis of everything we learned. It includes both a downloadable toolkit, but then the website itself also functions as a toolkit. And you can walk through it either step by step as you would in the actual printed version, or based on the role that you are within the hotel. So we've curated it based on your function, so it's not as overwhelming for the line level folks. Thank you.
And I'm Ashley McCormack. I am with McDonald and wanted to share a little bit about our food donation program with everyone today. So about 4 years ago is when we first piloted our food donation program, which we do with our partner Food Donation Connection. And so we piloted that initially, and after creating a system with them that worked, we rolled it out across the U.S. It's now available to all of our franchisees and owner-operators. And we have it in about 850 restaurants, and to date we've donated about 475,000 pounds of food. And you know, at McDonald's, obviously our biggest goal is to feed people, and I think some of the people that most feel passionately about this in particular are our crew members. And so the programs where we have, or the restaurants where we have this program, all of the crew members really get excited about it and are really happy to participate in it. And you know, when working with Food Donation Connection, the way we work is we donate food that's cooked, so mainly proteins. We also donate some baked goods, but essentially it's meats, breakfast patties, chicken, and so these are products that have cooked. Once they can no longer be held over and served, they're then frozen, stored until they're picked up by the partner organization, and then repurposed into different meals. And so we are working on growing the program both in the U.S. as well as looking into ways to expand it to other countries. And we're also excited because obviously, I don't need to tell you, but since food waste is a big part of our greenhouse gas emissions in general, we announced a science-based target this year to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions. So we're excited to see how growing this program and implementing it can also help us achieve those goals as well.
Awesome. So, hi everybody. It's 3:15. You must all be exhausted. Thank you for coming to our session. I see so many friends in the audience. I had the opportunity to attend our first refed launch back in 2016, and I had flown in from New York the night before that event, and I was jet lagging, so I went to the gym about 3 o'clock in the morning, and of course I didn't turn the lights on because I'm sustainable. And I was working out, and a gentleman came in and he was like, "Excuse me, can I turn the lights on?" I'm like, if you have to. So he turned the lights on, got on an elliptical or something next to me, and after a couple of minutes he's like, "I don't need the light on." He got off, turned the light off, got back on the elliptical, and we started to have a conversation around what we were doing up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it turned out that he was one of the major funders of refed, and we hit it off. And I told him a little bit about what I was hoping to do at Baldor, and he said, "You have to say a few words tomorrow. You're not on the program, but you have to say a few words." So I listened to the conference go on, and I was getting very frustrated, to be honest, because I have no patience. Those of you who know me know I have no patience. So I couldn't imagine 2030, 2050. So at that conference, at the end, I said, Baldor Specialty Foods, which is a distributor of produce and specialty food items, will be a zero organics to landfill company from our fresh cuts production in 2016. I got on the airplane, I flew home, my phone was ringing off the hook, it was the president of Baldor. Little did I know, he sits on a board and members of the board happen to be in the audience and called him and said, "You're going to zero?" And so he's like, "How are we doing this?" And I said, "I don't know, but what I do know is zero is a great number, because when you're zero, there's no excuses." So we'll talk a little bit about that journey as the day goes on. But, and I think it starts to inform everything you do. It's not just food. It's the way you sort of live your life. It's the way you run your business. I have to do a shout out. I'm probably going to get in trouble for it. But Adam Kay's in the room. Adam, raise your hand. He's going to get mad at me. But Adam Kay is sort of my mentor. He's a friend. He's a chef. He's done extraordinary things in this space. And back when people weren't really thinking about food the way we think, the way this room thinks about it, he came to a tour at Baldor, and he saw the way we were treating the food that remains from our fresh cuts production. So we're processing about 1,200,000 pounds of produce each week, creating things like carrot sticks and mirepoix, because it's so hard to cut vegetables at home. There's all this movement, right? So we're supplying that product. As a result of that product, we generate about 170,000 pounds of leftover food that we used to call all these horrible names and treat it poorly. But Adam saw that area where we collected it, and it was this beautiful array of colors and carrot peel and butternut squash peelings and cores of pineapple, etc. And he said, "That looks like a dumpster dive salad." Well, that dumpster dive salad has become a huge part of our culture at Baldor, because not only did he create a pop-up restaurant with a lot of the food from Baldor and some of the food from his organization, but he started a momentum around, wait a minute, can I eat that? Is that edible? And the education provided a roadmap for me in our business. And then I attended Refed, and then I got really fired up, and I said, not only can we do a pop-up, but we have to do something with all of this food. That was in April of 2016. By November of 2016, Baldor became a zero organics to landfill company from our fresh cuts production, and we've been every day since. Thank you. So zero becomes the motivating number, and as we move forward with looking at zero as a company, you'll see up here we're bringing IDP to the market with Becky's company, Compass. We sell imperfectly delicious produce to a lot of the chefs. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to convince people that something that's shaped a little differently than the size that they expect it to be is edible, and so the education has to take place not only with the end user, but also with the chefs, and so that's a lot of the work. Adam actually asked me earlier, why aren't there other chefs here? And that's a great question. The next refed has to be chefs. There needs to be chefs here. Sparks, the word sparks is scrap spelled backwards with a C. One of the things I would no longer tolerate, and don't to this day at Baldor, is we never refer to food and the W word at the same time. We don't use that word. We don't print that word. We purposefully use 100% of our food, period. There is no W, it's all used. When we think about that 170,000 pounds, we want to partner with you, and some of you are in the audience, like Phil Abundance. We're studying how we could take our tomato top and convert that into a tomato sauce that can be jarred and used at a later date when tomatoes aren't really that delicious, so that their community of users can have a delicious tomato sauce. That's really not so different than what my family does every August. Sicilian family, we gather, we take bushel loads of tomatoes, and we make our tomato sauce for the year. And we've done that forever. I thought that was normal. But we want to make that normal with this excess produce that we have. And the last thing that I'll mention is, I think that to challenge the organization to continue to reach milestones is really, really important. And one of the things we did this year is we worked with a number of partners. Jonathan Deutsch, I don't know if he's in the room. We worked to create a zero organics to landfill, a zero waste dinner for 312 people in Greenwich, Connecticut. We did it by sourcing products from 35 different vendors, all donated. We opened up the event. It was free to attend, but you could sponsor a table. We were able to raise $60,000. We donated the money to Kids in Crisis and Wholesome Wave. And what we did with the money is we funded nutritious food for children in crisis in the Greenwich, Connecticut area for a full year with the money we raised. But the idea of the event was to prove that we could put on an event and send nothing to landfill, and I mean zero. We didn't use plates that went into the garbage, no forks, there were no plastic bottles used. The chefs, we partnered with 4 celebrity chefs. They couldn't use plastic wrap or foil or anything that went into the garbage. And the litmus test at the end of the event was looking in the trash and raising that lid and seeing that there was nothing in that garbage. We can do this. This can't be about what we're thinking in 2030. It has to be today. And I hope you will leave this conference thinking, what are we doing in 2018? That by the end of this year, we've reached milestones that we've set up for our organizations, and don't take no for an answer. You can do it.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we're going to dive into the Q&A, but all of our speakers kindly provided photos of their initiatives actually in action. So we'll have a slideshow playing in the back so that you can actually see all of their great work. Awesome. Great. So you guys did a great job of talking a lot about the why behind all of these initiatives that you're doing, which is really just motivating and inspiring. But I would love to hear more about, some of the unique challenges that you've faced within, the respective work that you're doing and how you overcame them. I know each industry kind of can be very complex in their own way. So I'd love to hear from you what some of those complexities are and what you guys needed to do to make these initiatives happen.
I guess I can start. And I guess there's challenges, and I'm not sure we fully overcame all of them, but some of the challenges are measurement, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's having this issue, but just with, either it's the labor behind it or just trusting that the numbers that are going into the system are correct. That's a little bit of a challenge, but it is trusting our people, and we are a food first company and a food service company, and our chefs and associates, they care about the food, so they're not, no one is trying to waste food, so that's like very reassuring to us, as well as like the waste audits we've been talking about. That is a labor intensive thing, but it opens up so many doors and gives so much insight and true numbers. At one of our K-12 accounts that was sending everything to landfill, Eatable went in and did a waste audit, gave them recommendations, and after 4 months, 91% of it was diverted from the landfill. So that was,
Yeah, that does deserve a round of applause. Thank you, Allison.
so there are challenges, and we haven't overcome them all, but I think like insights and learnings from those waste audits and through the data that we do have, we are able to share that with some of our other accounts.
Well, I was just going to say, so I think one of our key differences that we did this year was with our plan, we just kind of jumped in and set some big goals. And I think there's kind of a difference of opinion on whether that's a wise thing to do or not. Some people don't like that, but we set some long-term goals, and then we set goals for 2018 and 2019 as well to try and at least get some short-term targets out there. One of the, for like food rescue, one of the biggest opportunities we have there, frankly, and I talked about this yesterday, if anyone was at the food donation roundtables, was just better execution of our current Zero Hunger, Zero Waste food rescue program. So if we could just get, we have 500,000 people at 2,800 stores, and if we could get them all doing things consistently at any given time, and because we have turnover and there's training and there's just consistent execution is always a challenge. So some of our leadership at one point was uncomfortable at first with the idea of setting these big goals and not knowing exactly how we were going to get there, because we're a very data-focused company and we like to have everything buttoned up before we talk about it. But this is a change for us in terms of setting a big target out there and then working with some key partners to try and figure out and collaborate on the best solutions, which is part of why we're doing the Innovation Fund too. But we know at the same time that from the 2018 perspective, we have very specific things we need to do to at least make change happen and get started. So that's what we're focused on now.
Yeah, so I'll build on both of those. So as a kind of a third party, if you will, working virtually with 10 hotel properties across the U.S., you can imagine we faced a lot of challenges. And we actually laid out a lot of them in our toolkit with the challenges that we experienced during each step along the way, and then some of the ways that we attempted to overcome them. But we faced challenges with measurement. We were asking all of the properties to do all of their own measurement and reporting to us. So just getting the data consistently, trying to make sure it was actually accurate data, those were definitely big challenges. Another big one that I think probably applies to a lot of other folks on the panel was turnover. So in the hospitality industry, you have turnover at almost all levels. When we were doing this project for 4 months, we had at least 3 of the key people that we were working with move to other properties, which can be very disruptive, as you can imagine. So one of the things that we really tried to do along the way, and we're hoping that we're going to check in with the properties, I think, kind of at that 1-year anniversary mark to see if it's stuck, but really making it part of the actual culture of the property. We have, as I mentioned, training videos, so making those a mandatory part of any culinary onboarding training. Ideally, it would be mandatory for everyone at the property, but we were just focused kind of on culinary. Sales staff would be also great because the 2 of those departments typically interact, and if they are not interacting well, that can lead to a lot of the waste. Another big challenge that might be unique to the hotel sector was working in cities that have really strong unions. So we were unable to work in a few cities such as New York, who have incredibly strong union presence, which meant that the act of asking someone to put the food in a different bin constituted a new job responsibility, and therefore would have to go through kind of a debate and a back and forth negotiation with the union as to, okay, you're doing this one thing slightly differently, we deserve more money for that. So that was a big challenge, and one that I think New York is still probably struggling with, and I haven't been following what the sector has been doing, but now with the organics ban, I have to assume that they're doing something, so the unions might be negotiating right now what that is. But those were 2 of the biggest ones that, I mean, the turnover was huge, and I think that probably applies to restaurants and retail. So really making food waste prevention and just the standard operating procedures just set and part of how you run your business is really the best way of ensuring that it will succeed after you have that champion leave and go somewhere else.
For us at McDonald's, I think the biggest hurdle that we had to overcome was concerns around food safety and quality, especially with lots of lawyers who were involved and in discussions who initially said, no, we can't do this at all, and kind of getting them to feel comfortable with that. And so that's where having a partner like Food Donation Connection was really helpful, to have a process to make sure that it was done systematically and the same everywhere, because logistics was also a concern. We ask our crew members and our franchisees owners to do a lot of different things. So creating a system that could be applied throughout the whole country, as well as something that didn't take up a lot of extra time and wasn't too much effort, was really important. And so one of the ways, for instance, that we mitigate some of the food safety concerns is that the food that we donate is given to places that then cook and then serve it there versus food pantries. So that was one way that made our lawyers feel a little bit better. There's always kind of workarounds and ways to solve that. Another thing that I think is a constant thing that we're working on is making the case that this is important, especially at the restaurant level. So since the majority of our restaurants are franchisee owned, and so we don't require that they participate, how do we make the business case and prove that this is a good program for them? So there's lots of benefits once you start doing the program and people are bought in once they start, but it's getting that hurdle, both from a corporate level initially of starting the program, and then now that it's out there with the people who run the restaurants, that there are so many benefits and it's not that hard to do, so it's something that they should be doing.
So along the theme of changing cultural norms, I was in what we call our D-box room, where we clean all this produce before it gets processed, and I saw these beautiful sweet potato peelings coming up this line, and the sweet potatoes, have a very thin skin. They clean very easily, right? So the water basically is cleaning them. There's not much skin left, but we have to peel them, right? So we still peel them. There's beautiful sweet potato peelings going up the line. And we had some guests coming to Baldor, and I was just recently at the company, and I was looking at these, and I thought, I'm gonna cook those for the guests. And so I took the sweet potato peelings upstairs, I found some dairy product that was remaining from some event we had, and I had some leftover cheese from some event we had, and I made a sweet potato gratin, so as well as some other foods, and served it. And our owner came in. The owner of Baldor is very young. His father passed away 5 years ago. It's one of the reasons I came to the company. And he is looking at this, and he starts to eat it, and he's like, wow, this is really good. And then he's like, can I have some more? And, you know, of course, everybody's eating, so he ate some more. It's like, how did you make this? When I told him it was the sweet potatoes off the sweet potato peel thing, he was like, what? Is that safe? So changing cultural norms is really important. But, you know, we have to show examples. We have to show people that you can take, I'm assuming it's a burger, that can be repurposed into a chili or whatever it might be. And once we show people that you can do it and it's delicious and it's fun, you know, if you've ever made a gratin, what's the hardest part? Shaving the potatoes, right? That's what takes so long on Thanksgiving Eve when you want to go to bed or party. You're busy making your sweet potato. Well, you don't have to if you buy them from me because they're already done. So then I could talk about it with chefs. I could say, I could sell you a sweet potato peeling and you could make a gratin. And by the way, you don't have to peel the sweet potato. So while we want to see something as a product that we're willing to send to landfill today, I'd argue nothing should go into landfill, so what can we do with it? Just to put things into perspective, in 1938, we opened our first landfill in the United States. That was 80 years ago, pretty much today, that we opened our first landfill. And why is that? Because animals live much closer to us. We had something to do with all these food products. Once that went away and our proteins became further and further away, we had to do something with this food we didn't eat. So in an urban environment, we thought the only solution was to discard it. And by discarding it, that means the sanitation department takes it somewhere else. It's no longer our problem. But we all know in this room it is our problem. And we are the believers, right? So now we've got to go into our organization and say, you know what? We've got to get to zero. We can no longer commingle food with any products in our company. And I don't care if you're a food processing company or you're IBM. There should be no commingling of food. The food for us is too much of a valuable resource for us to do something with it. If we're not going to eat it, then to commingle it with our waste. That's the largest cultural change norm that we have to get over. But together, we can do it.
Fantastic. I'm hearing a lot about needing to change behavior and cultures, and I was talking to a friend the other day who's just like, those who are in typically in a sustainability or corporate social responsibility role are influencers at the end of the day. You have to identify the right stakeholders, get the buy-in, create alignment across teams. And so, Thomas, you touched on this a bit, but how do you do that? What have you found that works to create that alignment and find the right people? What a big question.
We going the other way? So I think showing the examples as I talked about was one of them. I look at 3 pillars, and this may help just frame your thinking when you're trying to put a point when it comes to reduction of the lack of what I call use of an asset, right? We have all these assets under our control, human resources, the lighting, food. How do we maximize the use of those assets? That's got to be your starting point. Are we maximizing the use of our human resources? If we're not, we got to change something, etc. There's 3 things to think about. The food, is it nutritious and delicious? In the case of our Sparks, it is 100% of the time. We just have to find the right user for all of it, so we got that. The second thing is it good for the environment? Well, you can't sell that to everybody, but you can make an argument that by us not sending 170,000 pounds of food to landfill every week, that we're doing something right for the environment. So that might be the thing you're excited about. And then the third is, what's the economic value of this decision? And for us at Baldor, every single sustainable initiative we've put in place, and we have about 15 completed now, 15 in the works, have added to the bottom line. So sometimes all 3 appeal. Most times they do. Sometimes it's just 2 of them. Sometimes it's 1. But you've captured everybody. You've captured everybody. And so that's what we had to put in place to bring everybody on board, show them those 3 components.
For us, I think it's a lot about often making the business case. So some people can be compelled through the environmental or some sort of social reason, but a lot of people want to know, well, what's the business case? So, I think finding the person in certain departments that you can go to who can influence others, like the person in the legal department who you can say, we really need to get this passed, like, no, it's not going to work, so what's the workaround? In the supply chain, sustainability team, communications team, figuring out all those different nuances. And then for us, there's a lot of companies that do so much market research on things, so how can you get sustainability questions added into that market research about programs you want to pilot, about things you want to test, so then you can point to data that says, this is an important thing for us to be doing. This moves customers. And again, building on that business case has also been a really impactful way for us to be able to show value in things that we're piloting or show a case for why we should start something new too.
Yeah, so I guess in WWF we were acting as influencers of influencers. Since we were not at the property, we had to help the champions that we had from each of these 10 properties actually influence the various departments that they were working with. So one of the ways that we tried to do that was really to just give them as many helpful tools and templates as possible. So for example, we asked them to convene a task force meeting with a representative from each of the key departments within their property. So that would be sales, culinary, stewarding, which is the end-of-life management, banquet staff who actually run the banquets. And we provided them with the PowerPoint that they could use, a script that they could use, an actual agenda. So I think giving, sometimes in this case, people just the tools and the tips that they need to actually go and make that business case or that case for action can be really helpful. I think a lot of people sometimes don't know where to start, but if you give them something to start with, that can help lead to action.
I think that's right. For us, so we are a big company, but our core team who kind of leads Zero Hunger, Zero Waste is actually quite small. So we have to survive by influence and persuasion to get things done. So we work a lot with the key people in the business and pull on whoever we need, whether there are people in retail operations who manage the food rescue program, or people in the waste and diversion area, or in the shrimp team. So we kind of have pulled together our champions team, and then we also bring in our own influencers. And we bring them in to talk to the people in our business who now, actually, I would say, 9 months after introducing Zero Hunger, Zero Waste, are really, they've been hearing it for 9 months inside the company even, and they're kind of prepped and ready now. We've done our food waste footprint. We're going to come in and talk to some of the key departments and say, this is where we are and this is what we need you to do and what ideas do you have? And they're actually excited about that conversation. So, but it's a journey. We're just starting it. We have a lot of work to do, but they're receptive and they're ready to go.
I think for us, this was unique in that it came kind of the bottom up instead of top down, from corporate down. It was coming from our guests and wanting and our associates want to be part of food recovery programs. And so that's where it kind of sparked the conversation of food donation and then how else we can, stop wasted food. And so that was nice to see that it was a little bit of a change of culture. But we did have to, we do have to make a business case for the rest of it. And so once that kind of sparked, we looked into different trend data. So we saw different trends, and I agree with, it shouldn't really be a trend. I think Dana was talking about it this morning, but that was a good kind of start to talk about to our higher ups. And we have sustainability stakeholders in all of our sectors. So we speak with them who also speak to our culinary, and that is a big, as a food service company, our culinary team really is the heart, and all of our chefs and managers really look up to them. So having those sustainability stakeholders that work closely with the chefs and culinary leads has really helped us push the program, as well as the business case for reducing food waste.
So tell us more then about like where you are today with these initiatives. You know, what successes have you seen to date, both internally, but also along the supply chain? I'd love to hear. Oh, whoever wants to jump in.
So
Do you want to go?
You go ahead.
I was gonna switch up the order.
Perfect.
So since we kicked off our pilots in March of 2017, we've seen two of the largest brands in the U.S., Hilton and Marriott, make commitments to food waste reduction. They've both committed to 50% reduction. Hilton's is by 2030, Marriott's is by 2025. And so that, we think, is a really great success, that we were able to show that with a few simple steps and some of the tools that we've developed, you can really achieve large reductions in a short amount of time. And we think this definitely helped influence some of these larger brands to make these very bold commitments within, months of us releasing the final product. And just to give you a sense of how many properties that roughly is, it's about 7,000 globally, since Hilton's is actually right now only focused on their owned and managed, which is a small subset of their overall portfolio.
I'll go next. So I would say some of the things that we've seen since we've started the program. So first, back to that concern over food safety and quality. We've really implemented the program well, and then I think one thing that we didn't necessarily account for was that the quality of the food that we're actually serving our guests has gone up, because there's not an incentive to hold over food any longer, which people who are making the food had a lot of guilt over wasting food. So this is makes them feel better about it, and overall just improves the quality for everyone. There's definitely been a big business case for restaurants who take part and participate in the program. So there is a tax incentive for them, so they get a little bit of money that way. It also decreases the cost of the waste that they're hauling, and they often, when they see the food that is being donated, it makes them change their ordering and actually order less. So they use less food, which is great. And then it's a great way to connect with the community and keeps the crew members happy. So, when you think about retention and a lot of those issues, it's definitely something that people are proud to be part of, and proud to donate and talk about, and further connect with the community that way too.
So I think, it's important to think about what should be or shouldn't be landfill bound. If you ask me, nothing should, right? So one of the challenges, I now have a sustainability team, which is great because now I can boss them around, make them jump in the dumpster, which is good for everybody to do. So I encourage you to jump in your dumpster. One of the things that I find interesting is if we have an asset that never makes it to the dumpster, people will treat it differently. You can't make people extract things from the garbage, but you can encourage them never to put it there. What am I talking about? In food production, or rather in distribution, we'll have like corner stays. They keep the pallets together, these heavy cardboard objects, and we just used to toss them. Why? Because the cardboard recyclers wouldn't take them, because they couldn't turn them into pulp. That was not true. They would take them, but they would only want a pallet of those. So it meant creating a pallet of corner stays. Okay, now we got that out of the dumpster. How do we make sure nobody commingles any recyclable items in the compactor? Well, we just incentivize them not to do that and make sure those are captured on the side. So if we start pulling apart the compactor itself and saying, do we need to put any of this in there, or can we actually capture it? What we've done is we have now categories of recyclables that we never recycled before, and all of those are either generating some revenue or at least are at zero cost to Baldor. So on full calendar the year this year, it will generate about $500,000 to our bottom line. And that's mainly because there's not a lot of value for cardboard and plastics right now. But I'm talking about things that aren't so obvious, like broken pallets. And we sell broken pallets for $1 to a company that'll put another slat on them, and then they sell them for $7. So we're getting $1 for something that used to go into that compactor, right? You see what we're doing? So now we have all of these in motion, and quite frankly, all the assets in control of the company, I can see the employees treating them differently, because they don't want to hear me say, why'd you put that in that container? And it is really it's not only saving us money, but it's allowing us to purposefully use all of our assets. I mean, it's funny, like even printing reports that people don't need to print out. God help them if I walk by the printer. Right? So we can use shame. That's a good tactic.
Do you want me to go? So I would say similarly, and we're still in the beginning stages of this actual plan, but we have been working on, hunger relief and waste reduction for ages. So this is not new to Kroger, but it's kind of a new articulation of our vision for the future. So it has helped kind of bring out some champions inside the company, and then outside the company, it has brought us a lot of great ideas and people raising their hand who want to work with us to help us tackle the problem. So what I would say that, though, our first priority, of course, as a retailer is to sell what we have. So we do focus on sales. So we sell as much as we can, and then we mark it down. So our markdown program is actually quite effective, and we've been kind of doing more of that as much as we can. So there's a picture up here somewhere of our markdown program, which is really the red bags. So if you see some produce in the red mesh bags, that's what we lovingly call our red bags, and we're going to try and brand that a little bit better. But right now they just go as imperfect produce, and it gets marked down, and it sells. I mean, it sells really well, and that has been expanding. And we did kind of some work with Feeding America to look at our practices for looking at opportunities to rescue more fluid milk. But what we found in the stores we looked at in Cincinnati was our markdown program works really well. And so when we mark down our milk, people buy it too. So we do have a pretty effective process there. And then I won't cover it all, but we do a lot of, we send a lot to animal feed, so we try and feed people first, of course. We send a lot of food through Food Rescue to donation. But we do send, I think we have about 2,000 stores ultimately that have programs for animal feed and compost as well, and so we're trying to grow that in the future too.
I guess with Waste Not, we've seen an 11% reduction in food waste, which we're really happy about. But I think the awareness factor really plays a big role, and like we talked about earlier, the turnover, since we are getting, so much turnover in the kitchens, I think having that awareness of what you're chopping will be seen in a bucket, and someone will come through and look at that at the end of the day before it gets, thrown in the compost or in the landfill if there's no compost. I think that makes people really think about it, and then that's almost a training mechanism because they are trained that, but if they don't think they're being checked, then they might not be as careful. So that has been really great. And then our work with Refed on our recent solutions pilot, we saw a 20% reduction in front of house plate waste by just education and working with Refed through that. So that was really exciting.
Nice. Cool, so we'll pause here and actually turn it over to the audience for some questions. Nell, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I absolutely agree. I want to see more culinarians here. They are absolutely catalysts for all this work. So with you there. Denise, I wanted to ask you a question. First off, I think your leadership team is so lucky. You guys have really well thought out goals, but all support each other. They're kind of like pillars for a stool, or however you want to do, whatever analogy you want. But they're really, really well thought out. And I like the fact that they are aspirational, but tactical at the same time. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the zero waste goals. So you have a zero waste by 2020, zero food waste by 2025, and I don't really understand how that Venn diagram works. So does zero waste not include food? Is that material? Or
well, we already had our zero waste goal that we set with our 2016 sustainability goals for 2020. So which was 90% diversion from landfill as company-wide, all waste. So we wanted to keep that goal, but then we figure it'll take us a little more time to tackle the remaining food waste. And so
you're assuming that the remaining 10% will be mostly food waste?
That's kind of what we've talked about. So we think it's going to be a little challenging to finish up on the food waste side. And so, and at the time when we set the goal too, we hadn't mapped our food waste footprint. So we kind of had set the goal and then dug into the process of working on the food waste piece. So now we've kind of done that, and now we're looking at exactly what it's gonna take to get to zero. And it's also getting to zero, that's gonna be, we think, as we do kind of with everything, we think that that last 10% is gonna be probably the most challenging, so that we get to the point where we don't have any going. It's gonna be a big challenge.
It's not that hard.
We might call you.
I think it's more difficult to be at 90, because at 90 you can have slippage. At 0, you have a program. We don't put food there. That's easier. We put the food there sometimes. You put the food there. I actually found going 0 food was easier than overall, because there are things that, like, you know, people say to me, what do we do with this old desk? And I'm like, find somebody to take it. I don't know. It's amazing what we're willing to discard, right? And that's why I think the dumpster dives are very important, because you need to understand what's being thrown out, because you're not watching at all times. I'll just mention that if you get people on the team, we call it our green team. We have about 15 people throughout all departments of the company who meet regularly about our initiatives to make sure everybody's compliant throughout the company. So we had an event called Burgers and Brew for our customers. We sell chefs and restaurants, and we serve beer. We partnered with a beer company to make different beers with fruit and vegetables and sparks. And then we made hamburgers and had this hamburger competition. So my thing was, nothing can go to landfill. All events at Baldor, we now are trying to be zero organics. We're trying to be zero to landfill, period. And we've been successful. We partnered with a composting company who provided us with the bins for the composted material and a bin for the recycling material. But there's nothing that can come through our event that can go to landfill. 0 is amazing, because if it's not 0, they can say, well, then this can go, these trays can go, that can go. No, we're 0. So we forced the chefs to say, what decisions do I need to make? Because at the end of the day, I have to be 0. We just had an off-site sales meeting, 3 days on different farms, 0 to landfill. The event had to be 0. Every employee got one of these. The chefs that cook for us, even right outside in a farm setting and right in the fields, had to use 100% repurposeful products. And the chefs were really challenged by that to a certain extent in the beginnings. They hadn't heard about that. We were in Reading, Pennsylvania. They weren't accustomed to it. They all did it. They all were compliant, and we reinforced the message.
Yeah, Becky, you teed up at the very end the issue of plate waste. So I would put to kind of everyone on the panel, you know, you can only go so far, even if you've got great leadership and great commitments, because there's a limitation to what you control. So I'm really curious to hear how you, as you know, representing your companies and corporate commitments, are looking to tackle the other side of the house, which is a bigger challenge and really gets into going beyond education, but really in some cases kind of asserting yourself as a company into what is the dining experience and sort of recharacterizing that, which is, I would presume, at minimum, very, very, very challenging, and at some of the top leadership levels, a very low priority.
For us, I guess, you know, going beyond the education piece, recently we've been starting to do more grazing menus, so it's just a little bit smaller portions. So then if people, because I think that's the way people are moving to eat, is they want a little bit of everything, and so that has seemed, and it's a new program, but that has seemed to help with plate waste, just because then people aren't getting as much that they may not like, you know, so that has helped us.
So with the hospitality industry, we tested a few different ideas. So obviously portion sizing is a big one that you have, or that the business has control over, but can also influence how the consumer consumes and the amount of plate waste that you generate. So one of the things that we showed the chef when we did an audit of an 800-person event was how much food they were producing per person for that entire event. And we added it up, and it was about 2 pounds for lunch. The average person consumes around 1 pound per meal. So they were producing twice as much food for people for each event. So just having people just think a little bit more about what they're putting out there is one of the ways I think that you can really kind of dictate how much consumer waste you're generating, at least in the hospitality sector. The other thing we tested that was more kind of customer facing so that they could actually see and were engaged. And I think there are some photos up here where various conscious consumption cues is what we term them. So it was a food philosophy that the hotel put out around, we source these ingredients, we cook them carefully, we hope that you value them as well, or little cues like that on a buffet so that people would only take what they would potentially want and would actually consume. I think a lot of people get into the mentality of this might not be there when I get back, so I'm going to put as much of it on my plate as possible. And so just sometimes those little cues to get them to think, do I really want, 3 desserts, or can I come back if I want more, was helpful. The other thing that we did that goes back to the portion sizing was pre-plating various things for a buffet. So typically if you go to a breakfast buffet, you'll see like a huge platter of cheese and meats and some of these high value items. If the chefs kind of pre-portioned those, left one out, and said, if you want this, please ask your server, that cut down on a lot of waste because it made people think, okay, do I want this? And then if they did, they had to take that additional step to get it, and it actually cut down both on the waste, but then also on the procurement side, and it was a good business benefit to the hotel as well. So those are just a few examples, and we have more kind of on the website if you're interested.
The gentleman in the back, please.
Denise, you mentioned the imperfect produce program that Kroger has going on. I applaud you for that. I think that's fantastic. I wish we could sell more of that in this country versus some others that are really spearheading that effort. So this question is sort of for the other panelists on the group. Have your organizations, do you currently source imperfect produce for any of your products for production or for sale? Has this been a conversation in back rooms about potentially pursuing this?
Yeah, we have a whole list of imperfectly delicious produce. It started with Compass. It started with our Compass is Baldor's largest customer, so that was a good start for us. We've now made imperfectly delicious available to all of our customers. But it's so funny. I love the name and I don't like the name. I love it because it starts the conversation. But like one of our imperfectly delicious items is Satter Farm second cut spinach. But I promise you, when you buy it, you'd be like, what is this? It looks like spinach. Because that's what it is, So I've gone to other farms. So I'm on the sales side of things and sustainability, which I don't know if that strikes you as a weird combination, but it's really fun because in front of the chefs, they all want to talk to me about sustainability, which is super cool. But I'm not on the buying side, and that's very separated at Baldor. But if I go to a farm, I'll always say to the farmer, like, do you ever second cut? Oh, nope. It's all first cut, like, because they think, like, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm your friend. Could you do second cut? And they're like, it's like almost like a crime. Like, well, we were thinking about, I'm specifically talking about watercress production. Could you imagine? I mean, if you had any idea of the work that goes into growing watercress, it's unbelievable. But assume at the 90th day of its life, it's being cut, right? The last 15 days of its life, it's basically coming out of that water, it gets trimmed, and then it gets tilled under. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, could we just let it grow for another 15 days? We could. What would happen? Well, it's not as consistent, it's a little rough, not as tender. Like, can we just try? Because I guarantee you most people will not know that you just did that. So we are going to continue offering IDP, but there's a lot of education that has to go behind it.
And I'll say that we've seen a few of the hotel brands start to look into options for sourcing ugly produce, since a lot of it it's going into prepared meals, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. If they can get a better price, they're definitely interested. Unfortunately, a lot of them use, the very large suppliers, since it's part of, the purchasing program for the entire brand. But they've been trying to test it out in a few regions where they have a little bit more flexibility.
Adam, you were buying it, right, as a chef? What was your experience?
It was great. We were buying it for specific purposes and found ways to use it that may not have conformed to our traditional way of using X ingredient. Mm-hmm. But you guys figured it out.
Yeah, and we're obviously working with Baldor, but we also are working with SF Specialty, LA Specialty, and a couple other places. It's not fully deployed out over the country because it's not offered everywhere, but we are working with growers and houses to try and figure it out where we can.
Great question.
Let's
take one more question before we wrap up. Let me see back here. Oh,
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for your contributions and everything you said. I have a question for the folks who mentioned anti-hunger work, so specifically maybe Ashley and Denise. There's a growing chorus, I chair the Food Policy Council in New Haven, and there's a growing chorus of academics and food policy advocates who are trying to center issues of poverty in conversations about hunger, thinking about poverty as, or thinking about hunger as the existence of poverty rather than a lack of food. And I'm wondering to what extent conversations about wage or employee benefits loom in your conversations about how your organizations or companies are doing anti-hunger work. There's been, I don't know who in the room is familiar with the book Big Hunger that was recently published, but I'm wondering if you're thinking about these more structural, per se, approaches to doing anti-hunger work.
Yeah, I mean, so at McDonald's, I would say that when we, want our food to feed people we don't want to waste, but it's still right now pretty disconnected from a sustainability standpoint and isn't as intertwined with that conversation. So I don't know. I would say that those conversations kind of happen in more silos at the company.
I'd say we've been having a lot of those conversations lately, and with Feeding America, particularly with some of our Cincinnati partners in the community, and internally inside the company too. So we have, a lot of our customers are eligible for SNAP and WIC and government assistance, and as a retailer, this is just. When we have 60 million customers, we try to offer a range of affordable food as well. So we do kind of keep track of what all of our customers want, and so we do think about these issues all the time. So this is part of the work we do also.
Just as a follow-up, you mentioned, when you used the number 500,000, was that the number of employees you had?
That's our associates.
Do you know if any of those folks are on SNAP or WIC?
Some of them are eligible also for government assistance, yes. And so that's part of one of our initiatives as part of this plan also is to consider what we might do for our own associates. And one of the things we did recently that we announced was to raise our minimum wage to $10 an hour. So that was an increase, and that was something that we invested in. That was part of some of the of what we did to invest our tax benefit recently, and that we also introduced a tuition benefit as well, so that so that our own associates could take advantage of higher education, or even get their GED. So a lot of our investments have been in our own associates lately, and that is part of the conversation, definitely. So these are things we talk about with our partners and inside the company too.
Yeah, and I would add that, we also raised tuition assistance both at corporate and franchisee level. So, we're working on what the benefits are, and we also, I think, since we serve food at low prices as well, high quality food, but at lower prices, it's more affordable for some people who can't always access higher priced food. So, and I think those conversations are happening too, just not always connected to, I would say, food waste.
awesome. Well, thank you, all of you, for being here today.